Well, hello, welcome to another video, and if you're new, just welcome. I hope everyone is doing well. In today's video, we are going to be doing a very easy recipe of sourdough sandwich loaf. This has become a real staple in my house week to week. It's so easy to make. The first thing you're gonna need, of course, is a sourdough starter. I will leave some of my favorite sourdough starter videos down below, or you can get it from a friend. I got mine from my aunt and it is going very strong. And yeah, it's just a really good, easy, very soft loaf that my family loves and my kids enjoy. So I think that's a huge win. And it's also very easy and simple to make. And it's not too sour. You can really play with the recipe too and cater it towards your family. I also am going to be sharing how I make my homemade butter, because butter and bread go together and I just thought it would be kind of fun. So we're starting out with a half a cup of starter, nothing too crazy. Now, if you don't know what sourdough starter is, it is a natural leaven for your sourdough bread. This way, your bread is going to rise. You want to make sure your starter is very happy and fed before. You want to feed it with flour and water prior to baking your sourdough, and you want to make sure it's very bubbly, just like this. Lots of bubbles means it's very happy and active. If you're wondering if your starter is active and ready to bake, you can drop a little bit of starter in water, and if it floats, then it is ready to bake with, and if it sinks, then let it sit for a little bit longer. It could take about 1 to 5 hours depending on your climate for your sourdough starter to be active, but you want to make sure it's active so your bread has a good leaven and rise, and it has a good oven spring in the oven. So I'm adding a half a cup of starter to my KitchenAid, and then I'm gonna add about 2 cups, like 2.5 cups, maybe even 3. I'll leave my recipe down below on what I've been doing, and it works really well for us. I am making a all-purpose white bread, but we also make a whole wheat bread, and I will share that with you as well, because that's really good, a honey whole wheat bread. But right now we're just making a normal white loaf. So I'm using my KitchenAid to mix it up. The water, you want it to be room temperature or warm, and just mix the starter together. It honestly doesn't matter what order you do this in, because I have done it in every order, from adding the flour first, the starter, the salt, all of that. It really doesn't matter what order you do it in. I am adding about 8 cups of all-purpose flour, but I like to add about 6 cups first and then add the butter, the salt, and the honey, and then add 2 more cups of flour just to really get everything mixed well. You can do this by hand, of course. Sourdough has always traditionally been made by hand, but I have a mixer, and honestly, when you make bread all the time, I enjoy using my mixer, because I make a lot of things from scratch by hand, and sometimes I just really don't want to use my hands because it's messy and it's sticky, and I'm all here for making things by hand, but I think that using your mixer for things that you make all the time is necessity at this point. So I've done 2 teaspoons of Himalayan sea salt. You want to make sure you're using good salt, not table salt, and I'm doing about 3 tablespoons of honey. I am using a half of tablespoon measuring little spoon, so you're gonna see me doing it way more than 3 times, but that's just because it's a half a teaspoon. So I'm using pure organic honey. You can use whatever honey you want, but I chose this one and it's really good. I use local honey most of the time too. That tastes really good too. I am using a whole stick of softened butter, and we are just gonna mix this all up. It can get messy, and I just put a towel over it so I don't have to worry about flour flying everywhere all over my kitchen. I do have one of those like splatter plastic things for my KitchenAid, and I never use it. Ask me why. I really don't know why. I just don't like to pull out another thing. So I'm kind of just hand kneading it, just making sure it's all kind of together, and then we're gonna go ahead and give it another mix. And you wanna make sure that it comes together and make sure it's a nice supple dough and it's all together. The butter is gonna make this dough really soft, And you can always add water as needed, but I don't like to add too much water because you do not want this dough too runny, but you want to make sure it's nicely kneaded. The more you knead your bread, the softer your bread will be, and it will just have a really nice bounce back. So that is important. You want to make sure that the bread and the gluten is kneaded really well to have a good bread structure. So this is important. So after we did that, I am going to, this part makes me laugh because it's something so not fancy. It's just so simple. I just take my little dollar store bag, my little plastic dollar store bag, and I just cover it up and let it sit overnight. I put a towel on it just to make sure there's no air or anything going through. And I just let this sit on my counter for about 8 hours. And I throw it in the fridge in the morning because I like to work with a cold dough. It just makes it a little bit easier in the morning. And yeah, I let it sit in there for a little bit, maybe about an hour or two, and then I shape it, and then we're gonna let it rise again and bake. Honestly, you guys, this recipe is so simple. I got my original recipe from Farmhouse on Boone. I will leave her down below. She has a great channel, but I definitely changed some things that I thought could be a little bit different or better for my family. So I'll leave her down below if you want to check her out. But I did change the recipe a little bit, and this is what works for us. So I'm cutting out parchment paper. This is non-bleached parchment paper that I get from my local store. If you're using white parchment paper, do know that it probably is bleached and has chemicals in it, so just be aware of that. This is by the brand If You Care, and it's non-bleached, non-toxic, so I am very passionate about non-toxic living, and yeah, so I want to make sure all of that is not toxic, that I'm going through this effort of making this homemade bread. I don't want what I'm baking it in to be toxic, right? Right. I'm taking my dough out of the fridge and I am going to shape it. This part is always so fun and satisfying for me. I love to do this. So I'm just patting it down, and we are going to divide it. We're going to divide this dough into 2 loaves because this recipe does make 2 loaves. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but that's really nice because we go through bread really quickly around here. Lots of sandwiches and toast and all the bread things being made. So I'm just going to stretch one side. After I flattened and cut the dough, stretch it, bring it to the middle, and then the same on the other side. Stretch. You don't want to stretch too far because you don't want to break the gluten structure that we have created. Definitely don't want to do that. And then I just roll it kind of like a hot dog and then just shape it like that. Really simple. And then I put it in the parchment lined baking loaf pans and I let it sit for about 1 to 2 hours, and then I brush it with a little bit of egg wash, and then I put it in the oven. I put it in the oven at 375 for about 45 minutes. Everyone's oven is different though, so kind of just check on it. And you want to make sure that it is golden brown, and the egg wash just helps the browning process. And so does the honey inside of the bread when we made it. So the honey also ensures that it will have good taste as well as help brown the outside of the bread too. And yeah, so this has definitely been a favorite. It's very easy, simple to make, and sourdough has a lot of good health benefits. If you don't know, sourdough anything is gonna be a lot better than your normal traditional breads because by letting your sourdough sit overnight and it has the whole fermentation process, we call it bulk fermentation, it breaks down that outer layer of the grain, so therefore your stomach can easily digest it a lot better than if you were just to eat something that was not fermented. So we really do enjoy our fermented sourdough breads. It's so good. And it has that really nice, unique, sour flavor without being too sour. I only do about 1/2 cup, I said, of starter. If you want it to be a little more sour, I believe Farmhouse on Boone does a whole cup, and we were doing that for a while. But I just found that when I started playing with this recipe and recipe testing, once I got the whole making of it down, that 1/2 cup worked really well for us. And look at how golden brown these loaves turned out. They are so beautiful and taste amazing. Definitely let them cool and take them out of the cake tin before they cool off. If you let it sit in the loaf pan, it will get soggy, so you want to make sure you take it out while it's still warm. You don't have to do it when it's hot, but as soon as it cools down a little bit, I would take it out because you don't want the sides and stuff to be all soggy. Ain't nobody likes soggy bread, okay? So yes, this is our all-purpose. Now we're gonna move on to our whole wheat loaf. It's not like 100% whole wheat. I do about 7 cups of all-purpose flour and then just 1 cup of whole wheat flour. I do 2 teaspoons of salt, 4 tablespoons for honey though. So prior for all-purpose we did 3 tablespoons and here we do 4. This is the honey wheat sourdough loaf bread. So it's so good. This one is really yummy. It is not as soft as the all-purpose because naturally when you're adding whole wheat, it is a little bit more dense of a bread, but nevertheless so delicious. My kids really don't know the difference, so if you want to add a little bit of extra grain into your diet, then adding a whole wheat bread would be great. And it's just really simple and easy to make. It's honestly the same process, just a little bit more honey, and you're adding 1 cup of whole wheat instead of all-purpose. So it's really simple and it's delicious as well. You want to brush it with the egg wash, do exactly the same process, and then enjoy your bread. Now you cannot have bread without butter, right? So I wanted to make my homemade butter with you guys. It's very simple and easy. We have been loving the process of making our own butter. Store-bought butter will do just fine, and honestly, it doesn't matter too much when it comes to homemade and store-bought, I found, in price as well as ingredients if you are buying heavy whipping cream from the store. I did a ½ gallon of heavy whipping cream, and I am using my paddle attachment in the KitchenAid. You can do this by hand or an old-fashioned like butter churn, but I just do not want to do that. And I find it really satisfying just to sit back and watch it come together in the KitchenAid. I would like to get one that's maybe just manual one day, but for now, this is just fine. You're gonna watch it go through all of the stages of making butter. So it's basically at the whipped cream stage right now, and now it is getting very thick. You will see how thick it gets and you will be left with buttermilk. I also like to save my buttermilk for coffee, pancakes, waffles, things like that. It is not the same thing as store-bought buttermilk. Also, just a little tidbit about store-bought buttermilk. It is, like I said, going to be completely different. It's a completely different product Store-bought buttermilk has a live culture added to it, and that's why it's thick, as well as kind of smells a little sour, versus buttermilk the traditional way is very sweet and more thin, and they're just completely two different things. They don't sell traditional buttermilk in stores. So essentially what you're buying at the store is fake buttermilk, which I find so interesting. So there's just a little history on buttermilk. So if you're baking, again, the recipe modern day is going to be calling for buttermilk that has the live culture in it, and it's thick and it's sour. That's what they're calling for. And if you're baking like an old vintage recipe, then they will be calling for traditional buttermilk, which is made from making your own butter. So I just wanted to put that out there. They're completely two different products, and you cannot switch one out for the other because they do completely different things. Traditional buttermilk is basically just milk, so it's just completely, it's different. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that, and so there's no mix-ups there. It does get messy, so just be aware of that. When it does turn into little butter curds, it will get messy in the stand mixer, so just be aware of that because it will get all over the kitchen. And I am just straining out all of that buttermilk, like I said, and we are gonna put the butter to the side and we will shape it, and then I like to put it in the freezer. And this made a half a gallon, actually made about, I would say, 9 sticks of butter. So I didn't really save myself any money by doing this. I just find it really fun. The kids enjoy the process too. The heavy whipping cream cost me about $17 for a half a gallon, and each pack of butter cost about $5.50 for 4 sticks of butter. So I really didn't save any money again by doing this. It's just fun. I use the same creamery that I buy the butter from, so it's basically the same thing. I just find it really satisfying to make my own, but I still buy store-bought butter too, because like I said, you're not really saving any coin by making your own. It's just fun to do it. You could do it with raw milk too, or raw cream, but that's gonna be more expensive unless you have like a local farmer you can get it from. But if you're buying from like raw farms or something like that, it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be pricey, and you're better off just buying their raw butter instead of making it yourself, unless you really want to. But yeah, it's a really fun thing to do. If you have kids, I highly suggest it, and it's so fun. So then I just shape this, put it in the freezer, cut it into little cubes, and there you go. You have homemade butter, and this lasts for a while. It definitely gives you about like 9 sticks, give or take, of a half of cup of butter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will leave all the recipes down below. Thank you so much for watching. Tag me on Instagram if you guys make this recipe, and if you guys like it, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you changed anything. I would love to know. You can do so much with this recipe. It's honestly just a base. Feel free to get creative with it. And I would love to see your guys' creations over on my Instagram. My Instagram is houseofharveys_. I will leave all that information down below, again with the recipe. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.